Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at something really fundamental. The power of the gospel to do more than just, change individuals. We're exploring its potential to transform entire nations.
Exactly. And we'll be drawing primarily from a document called 006, The Power of the Gospel to Transform Nations.pdf.
Right.
And our goal, really, for you listening, is to grasp how this message can drive broad societal change and maybe pinpoint some key principles and real-world examples that show this transformative power in action.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Could the real key to a thriving society lie not just in policy or economics, but, in a message that speaks to the core of humanity?
Yeah.
Across cultures.
That's a central idea we're unpacking today, and
Right.
we'll also think about how mission work might be understood differently, maybe not just exporting Western values, but as a catalyst.
A catalyst, yeah, for local movements of social justice, community building, reconciliation even.
And what's interesting here is the focus on cultural humility. It's about seeing that the gospel can inspire change, organically from within communities.
Empowering local leaders then.
Precisely. Empowering them to drive sustainable progress in ways that actually fit their own context, rather than sort of imposing outside solutions.
Right. It's becoming clear how intertwined our personal struggles are with the larger issues facing our communities, isn't it? Which makes it vital to think about strengthening the moral, the cultural foundations of where we live. And, history seems to show the gospel has played a role in renewing whole nations.
It really has. And this leads us to this idea of a fresh blueprint for holistic ministry. Not outdated frameworks, but something that really values the unique fabric of every culture.
Finding ways for the gospel to resonate authentically within them.
Yes, exactly.
So the core challenge we're digging into is, how do we unlock this inherent potential of the gospel for societal renewal?
And view mission work maybe more dynamically, as a holistic force for justice, mercy, community development.
Yeah, a comprehensive force.
And hopefully what we explore gives some practical insights, whether you're leading, working, or just passionate about change.
How can we support local leaders adapt to different cultures?
Right. It's an invitation, really, to reimagine faith's role in shaping the future, bridging that spiritual depth with real-world impact.
So the central question we'll keep revisiting is, how can professionals committed to meaningful change harness this transformative power to renew societies?
That's the big question.
Okay, let's start to unpack this idea then. The gospel as a force for national renewal, moving beyond just individual salvation.
Okay, let's start with that traditional focus, the individual journey from sin to salvation, which is absolutely vital, of course.
Of course.
But the document argues the gospel also holds this, revolutionary power, potential to catalyze renewal across entire nations.
So the document calls this the divine blueprint for transformation.
Yeah.
First point, the holistic nature of salvation. God's salvation extending to all creation.
Yes, not just the spiritual realm in isolation. Colossians 1:20 is highlighted all things being reconciled through Christ.
All things. What's the core insight there?
Well, the insight is that salvation isn't just about individual souls, it's about redeeming all of creation, which implies a pretty profound responsibility for us, doesn't it?
To care for the world around us.
Right.
Work towards its renewal.
Exactly. The individual soul transformation is seen as deeply connected to reshaping society, culture, even national identity. It's a much bigger picture than just personal piety.
Okay. Then, biblical narratives of national renewal. Israel's journey from exile, rebuilt on covenant and hope. These aren't just historical anecdotes, are they?
No, not at all. They're powerful theological affirmations. They show God's power for communal healing, for restoring nations.
So God is interested in the flourishing of nations, not just people.
That seems to be the message. And it's not just backward-looking. Prophetic texts like Isaiah's vision of a new heavens and new earth, they offer this glimpse of a future reflecting God's kingdom.
Which leads right into Christ's kingdom, a template for renewal. The idea that Jesus wasn't solely focused on individual salvation.
Right. He was inaugurating a kingdom, one built on justice, mercy, radical love.
So how does that kingdom serve as a template for national renewal?
Well, the values Jesus lived and taught, they're meant to be the building blocks. Think about his interactions.
Reaching out to the outcasts, the poor.
Exactly. Those weren't just random acts of kindness. They were demonstrations of the kingdom's principles. It's a template for how a just, compassionate society could actually be structured, where everyone is valued.
Okay, so that lays the theological groundwork. Now, the document shifts to historical manifestations, starting with the early church, the seed of transformation. What's the takeaway from their experience regarding societal change?
What's really striking is how those early Christians, in a very different world, introduced revolutionary ideas about community, mutual support, self-sacrifice. These were radical concepts.
So the takeaway is that living out these principles became a force for societal change.
Yes, it wasn't just personal choice. Their faith had public consequences. Their radical love, even for enemies, contrasted sharply with the surrounding culture.
And this influenced social welfare, even legal structures?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
It attracted attention, gradually shifted values. People saw a different way to live. Over time, this influenced how society cared for the vulnerable, even prompting legal changes towards more humane principles.
Then we move to the Reformation and beyond, reclaiming the public sphere. How did the Reformation impact things beyond just theology?
Well, it was a massive catalyst for societal change. People like Luther, Calvin, they challenged the established social and political order, not just religious doctrines.
So the key insight is that rediscovering gospel principles can challenge systemic injustice, inspire change.
Absolutely. The Reformation, by emphasizing individual dignity before God, really paved the way for many modern ideas. We value individual rights, social equity, conscience in the public square.
And this isn't just ancient history. The document looks at contemporary movements and the global context. The gospel is still influencing nations, from grassroots efforts to national dialogue.
Yes, and what's crucial here is that it's not about imposing a single Western model.
Right.
It's about empowering diverse communities to find their own dignity and potential through the gospel, within their unique identities. Authentic transformation from the inside out.
Okay, so how do we make this practical? Living out the vision of national renewal, starting with integrating faith with public life. What's the core message?
This is where the rubber meets the road, really. The message is, the gospel isn't just for private life or Sunday mornings. It's a mandate for public transformation.
So our laws, institutions, community practices, they should reflect kingdom values: justice, mercy, humility.
Ideally, yes. And it's not just for pastors or leaders.
Right. The document says all believers, leaders, and citizens are stewards of God's renewing work. What does that look like practically?
It means personal integrity, ethical behavior are fundamental, but it also means consciously working for systemic change, advocating for fairer policies, volunteering, speaking out against injustice. We all have a role.
Okay, let's get concrete. Actionable steps for community renewal. First, civic engagement. Participating in local governance, advocating for policies, holding institutions accountable. Why is that so important?
Because our civic structures shape everyone's lives. Engaging allows us to bring kingdom values into the societal fabric, working for a more just environment for everyone.
Second, educational initiatives. Promoting curricula, emphasizing moral development, understanding history, highlighting the gospel's transformative power. How does education fit in?
Education shapes future generations, doesn't it? Instilling values like compassion, integrity, justice, understanding faith's historical impact. It equips young people to be agents of positive change.
Makes sense. Then the church is a bridge. Its unique role connecting spiritual renewal and societal transformation. How can the church be this bridge effectively?
Well, it can be an incubator for innovative solutions, tackling poverty, inequality, and justice. By embodying a countercultural model of leadership and community and actively serving the wider community, it becomes a powerful force.
For both spiritual and societal transformation.
Exactly.
Finally, in this part, a vision for the future. The key message about shaping the future of nations.
Importantly, it stresses renewal isn't about imposing a Western model. It's an invitation for every culture to rediscover its unique potential through Christ.
So each nation harnesses the gospel authentically, contributing to global renewal.
That's the vision, a collective hope for transformation. Hope beyond just individual salvation, envisioning societies where justice prevails, love guides policy, everyone contributes.
So what does this initial overview really tell us?
It tells us the gospel's impact is far-reaching. It's not confined to the personal. It has inherent power to reshape societal foundations when embraced and lived out publicly.
Okay, let's delve a bit deeper into the mechanics then.
Yeah.
How specifically does the gospel bring about this transformation? The next section is how the gospel transforms nations. It says it's more than personal rescue. How can we visualize that wider impact?
The document uses that analogy of a raindrop. One drop seems small, right?
Hmm.
But countless drops become a life-giving flood. Similarly, the gospel's power, starting in individual hearts, spreads and accumulates, eventually impacting society at every level.
That's a helpful picture. This section revisits the theological blueprint, starting with a message beyond the individual. Romans 12, Colossians 1 again, renewal of minds, reconciliation of all things. What's the core point?
The point is, individual transformation isn't the end goal, it's the starting point for broader renewal. Our personal change, as Romans 12 suggests, should lead to a renewed way of living that reshapes our communities. They're interconnected.
Individual and societal transformation go hand in hand.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Then the kingdom vision again. Jesus reimagining social norms, lifting the marginalized, challenging power structures. Why is this vision significant for national transformation? Because it provides that blueprint for a just and compassionate society. It calls every society to comprehensive renewal, reflecting God's heart for the vulnerable. It's a present invitation, not just a future hope.
And the third part, redemption of culture and society. Biblical examples like Israel's return, the early church in Acts. What do these narratives teach us about the scope?
They teach us that national and cultural transformation is a natural, expected outgrowth of the gospel taking root. God is consistently concerned with the well-being of nations and has the power to restore them.
Okay, moving to historical footprints. The gospel in action. Back to the early church, the seed of transformation. Their radical love, justice, communal care. What was so transformative about their community life?
It offered a compelling alternative. Their love, care for the poor and sick, emphasis on justice and equality. It's starkly contrasted with the Roman Empire's norms. These communities became early blueprints for a different kind of society.
Where every individual was valued.
Exactly. Then moments of renewal, reformations, and revivals. History showing gospel-sparked national shifts, like the Reformation emphasizing inherent dignity. How did these impact societies? They often led to profound change by challenging power structures and inspiring social justice movements. The Reformation influenced ideas of liberty, limited government. Later revivals often fueled social reform. It shows the ongoing power for both personal and public transformation.
And the global testimonies, Latin America, Africa, Asia, contemporary movements for justice, rebuilding, cultural resurgence. What's key about these global examples?
What's really key, again, is they're not just transplanted Western Christianity. They're vibrant examples of universal gospel truth taking root within local cultures, addressing specific needs and aspirations authentically.
Okay, so how do we translate this into action? Practical pathways to national renewal. First, integrating faith with public life, bringing faith into government, education, business, community. What does that look like practically?
It means a deep commitment to justice, mercy, truth in all public engagements, striving to make our laws, policies, structures reflect these values, serving the common good.
Under actionable strategies, first is community engagement, participating in dialogue, valuing diverse voices. Why is that critical?
It mirrors that early Christian community model. Open dialogue, diverse perspectives lead to solutions that are both just and effective for societal challenges.
Second, educational reform. Incorporating principles like compassion, critical thinking, social responsibility. How does that contribute?
It shapes the character and values of future leaders. Grounding education in compassion, justice, ethical reasoning equips young people to be engaged citizens committed to the common good.
Third, economic justice. Ethical practices, fairness, dignity for workers. What's the gospel connection?
It resonates with the biblical call to care for the poor, ensure everyone can flourish with dignity. A just economic system, ethically rooted, is vital for national well-being.
And fourth, civic leadership. Stepping up, modeling servant leadership, prioritizing others' needs. Why is that model transformative?
Servant leaders prioritize the well-being of those they serve. This builds trust, promotes accountability, ensures decisions serve the community, leading to a more just and effective society.
And back to the church as an agent of transformation. Bridging spiritual and societal, fostering environments for renewal. How can it fulfill this role?
By consistently living out gospel principles in teaching, action, community life, it becomes a beacon of hope, inspiring collective action for justice, compassion, reconciliation, embodying the values it preaches.
The final part here, broader implications. A vision for a renewed nation. Stresses renewal isn't one size fits all. What's the key message on diversity?
The key is it's not imposing one cultural model. It's each culture rediscovering its unique identity and potential through Christ, creating a diverse global tapestry of hope and transformation.
Concluding that the gospel is a living, dynamic force redefining nationhood under God. So what's the core takeaway from this deeper look at how the gospel transforms nations?
For me, it's the active, multifaceted nature. It's not abstract theology, it's concrete actions in every sphere, driven by gospel values and a vision for a better world. Faith as a dynamic force for positive change.
Okay, let's continue exploring beyond the personal to the kingdom's expanding influence. The document notes that while individual transformation is key, there's this wider vision, the kingdom reshaping communities, institutions. What's the essence of that broader kingdom vision?
Well, the essence is that God's plan isn't just saving isolated souls. It's about restoring all creation. Acts 3.21 hints at this God restoring everything. So personal faith becomes participation in this cosmic renewal.
So our individual faith journey is part of something much, much larger.
Exactly. And then there's the present reality of the kingdom. Jesus didn't just talk about the future. He said the kingdom had already begun breaking in.
Like the Lord's Prayer, your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Living it out now.
Precisely. It suggests the kingdom isn't just a destination, but a present reality we actively embody today.
It's both already here in some ways, but not yet fully realized.
That's the tension, yes. And the third aspect, living as citizens of heaven. How does seeing ourselves as kingdom citizens impact earthly responsibilities?
Dual citizenship, almost. Our ultimate allegiance shapes our values, guides our engagement with the world.
Absolutely. Our kingdom framework should inform our daily life and societal engagement.
Okay, the document then gives historical and scriptural evidence, starting with the early church, a model of kingdom community. Acts 2.4247, their communal living, care, prayer. What's the takeaway?
The takeaway is they weren't just focused inward, they were a living example of a transformed community, a tangible demonstration of the kingdom in action.
A society being remade by divine love.
Yes. Then the scriptural testimonies of restoration, Acts 3.21, Isaiah's renewed creation. What do these reveal about God's ultimate intentions?
They emphasize God's plan is comprehensive. Not just individual forgiveness, but ultimate restoration of all things, societies, structures, everything.
And the third piece, Jesus' radical redefinition of community, his commitment to the marginalized, challenging norms. What did this show about the kingdom?
It showed the kingdom values everyone. The last are first, barriers are broken. It was a fundamental reshaping of human relationships.
Exactly. Now, practical applications. Living out the kingdom's values. Starting with a call for holistic engagement. What does that mean?
It means faith isn't just private. It calls us to actively transform societal structures, aligning our public lives with kingdom values, justice, community, stewardship.
And the strategies for manifesting kingdom influence make this concrete. First, civic participation, advocating for just policies. How can believers do this effectively?
By getting involved locally, using our voices for fairness, equality, well-being for all, keeping kingdom principles central.
Second, educational renewal. Integrating kingdom values into learning. What's the potential impact?
Shaping future generations with love, justice, compassion, equipping them to build a society reflecting God's kingdom more fully.
Third, economic justice. Fair practices, dignified labor. The kingdom perspective on economics.
It reflects God's concern for the poor, working towards fair, equitable systems where everyone can thrive with dignity.
And fourth, community building. Fostering inclusive, supportive networks. How does this reflect kingdom values?
Directly reflects loving our neighbor. Building strong, inclusive communities mirrors the interconnectedness and care central to God's vision for humanity.
The section wraps with the church as a beacon of transformation, spiritual center and societal catalyst and broader implications, a legacy of transformation, challenging injustice, inspiring compassion throughout history. What's the main insight from this broader kingdom view?
For me, it's the powerful link between personal faith and the world. Our beliefs should have tangible results, motivating us to actively work for a more just and compassionate society, seeing ourselves as part of God's bigger redemption story.
Exactly. Faith isn't just personal. It's an invitation to join God in renewing and restoring all things, starting right where we are.
Now, you mentioned this tension, the already not yet. Let's explore that. The next section is embracing a kingdom in process. How does this idea of the kingdom being present but not fully realized shape our approach?
Well, it's fundamental. This already not yet tension is core to kingdom theology. It means understanding where we are in the timeline.
Okay, break that down. The tension of already not yet. First part, present victory, future fulfillment.
That is what
Like
we already. The already is Christ's victory over sin and death through his life, death, and resurrection. The kingdom has broken in. That's a present reality.
And the not yet.
The not yet is the future promise of a fully restored world. Think Revelation 21, new heavens, new earth, no more tears or pain. That complete fulfillment is still to come.
So we live between those two realities. How does the already manifest now? The already in our hearts and communities.
It manifests in the transformative work of Christ in believers' lives. That internal kingdom marked by forgiveness, hope, the Spirit's presence. And externally, through acts of justice, mercy, compassion, tangible expressions of the kingdom breaking through.
But then there's the not yet, a vision awaiting fulfillment. The world is still clearly broken, right?
Exactly. We still see injustice, suffering, brokenness all around us. That reminds us the fullness of God's plan hasn't yet arrived. We live in anticipation of that final restoration.
Okay, so living in this tension has implications for engagement. First, transformation with humility. What does that mean?
It means we work for justice and renewal, but we do it knowing the ultimate victory belongs to God. We don't have to achieve perfection ourselves. This breeds humility and patience, especially when progress feels slow.
So we're not discouraged by imperfection.
Hopefully not. We also become living testimonies. Our present actions, even small ones, should reflect the values of the future kingdom we hope for. The kingdom's values are meant to influence every sphere now.
So how do we apply this? Practical implications. Living in the tension. First, engaging in societal transformation. How does the already not yet affect this?
We participate with both humility and hope. We address issues like poverty or inequality earnestly, but we trust God's ultimate plan and timing. We don't carry the weight of fixing everything ourselves.
That's freeing in a way. The document gives a framework for action. Number 1, community involvement. Local initiatives reflecting kingdom values.
Right. Starting small, where we are. Food banks, mentoring programs, neighborhood cleanup, tangible acts of love and justice.
Number 2, ethical leadership. Integrity and servant leadership in all arenas, business, politics, home.
Yes, modeling kingdom values wherever we have influence. It's about character and how we treat people.
And 3, personal witness. Living out kingdom principles in everyday interactions.
Our daily lives, how we handle conflict, how we spend money, how we speak to others, these are all opportunities to witness to the reality of the kingdom.
So it's about balancing hope and responsibility.
Exactly. Our actions have eternal significance, even if they seem small or imperfect now. We're called to be faithful stewards of the gospel's hope, acting responsibly in the present.
What are the broader implications of living in this tension? First, redefining success and progress. How does this perspective change things?
We might measure success less by immediate, large-scale results and more by faithfulness, growth in character, the work of love itself. Recognizing the long-term impact of seemingly small, faithful acts.
That takes pressure off, maybe.
It can, and it leads to a call to patience and perseverance. We value the journey of transformation, not just the destination. It requires blending earnest effort with patient waiting on God.
That already not yet framework seems crucial for sustainable engagement.
It really is. It keeps us grounded, hopeful, and realistic all at the same time.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly to another core concept. Holistic salvation, beyond the spiritual. This builds on what we discussed earlier, defining salvation as comprehensive well-being, shalom, not just spiritual rescue.
Yes, this is vital. It challenges a narrow view of salvation. God's concern extends to all aspects of human existence. The goal is whole person flourishing.
So the breadth of God's redemptive work, it's not just individual souls.
Correct. While the soul is paramount, God cares about our bodies, our minds, our relationships, our communities, even our environment. Holistic salvation encompasses everything that makes us human.
And the kingdom of God, a vision of comprehensive renewal. The Sermon on the Mount is mentioned as reordering values. How does the kingdom relate to shalom?
The kingdom Jesus proclaimed is characterized by shalom, that deep sense of peace, wholeness, justice, right relationships, flourishing communities. It's a vision where everything is mended and thriving as God intended.
So when we talk about salvation, we should be thinking about participating in restoration of all things.
That's the idea. Recognizing salvation's impact on all creation calls us to be agents of that restoration in every dimension of life.
The document then outlines these dimensions of holistic salvation. First, physical well-being. How does the gospel connect here?
Well, look at Jesus' ministry. Healing the sick was a central sign of the kingdom's arrival. It shows God's concern for our physical bodies. This implies a call for us to care for physical health, both ours and others, and even the health of the environment that sustains us.
Makes sense. Second, emotional wholeness.
The gospel speaks deeply to our inner lives, addressing pain, trauma, fear, restoring hope and peace. It calls us to nurture emotional health in ourselves and support healthy relationships in our communities.
And third, social justice. This seems key to the national transformation theme.
Absolutely. Holistic salvation moves beyond personal piety to demand societal transformation. It means actively dismantling systems of injustice, advocating for the vulnerable, working for a society where everyone can flourish. It's inherent to shalom.
So, how do we live this out? Practical implications. Living out holistic salvation. First, personal engagement and community initiatives.
This looks like community service, creating support networks, environmental stewardship, volunteering at clinics, tangible actions addressing the full spectrum of human need.
Then, institutional reform and leadership. How does holistic salvation influence larger structures?
It calls for ethical, compassionate leadership that reshapes institutions, businesses, governments, schools to promote justice and well-being. It involves advocacy for just policies and integrative approaches that consider the whole person.
And finally, a model for the church. What's the church's role in promoting holistic salvation?
The church is uniquely positioned to address the full spectrum of human need. This means developing holistic ministries, combining spiritual care with practical support, like food pantries, counseling, job training, and collaborating with others in the community.
So the overall call is embracing a full spectrum of redemption.
Yes. Reimagining the gospel not just as soul-saving, but as a powerful force restoring every aspect of life towards God's vision of shalom. Every act of kindness, every pursuit of justice becomes a testament to God's desire for wholeness.
That leads naturally into the next concept, incarnational ministry, entering the story. The idea that God becoming human provides a radical blueprint for mission.
Exactly. The incarnation, God taking on flesh in Jesus, isn't just a theological doctrine. It's a profound model for how we engage with the world. It's about empathy, presence, participation.
So, theological foundations, the incarnation as a model. First point, God among us. John 1:14, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. What's the missional implication?
It implies humility and empathy. God didn't stay distant. He came near, lived among us. Our mission should reflect that, entering people's lives in context, not just shouting from afar.
And identification with humanity. Philippians 2 talks about Christ's humility, taking human form, becoming a servant.
Yes, it highlights the importance of truly identifying with people, immersing ourselves in their struggles, joys, daily lives, understanding their perspective from the inside as much as possible.
Okay, so what are the principles of incarnational ministry? First, entering the culture.
This means more than just visiting. It's learning the language, customs, stories, becoming part of the local life, not remaining an outsider.
Requires real effort and humility.
Absolutely. Second, contextual understanding. This involves respecting the history, values, and challenges of a community. Not coming in with prepackaged answers, but listening deeply to understand the context so that any help or message offered is truly relevant.
And third, relational transformation.
At its heart, incarnational ministry is relational, building genuine relationships based on trust, love, and mutual respect. Transformation often happens through these authentic connections, where Christ's love is lived out tangibly.
Can we see this in practice? Historical and contemporary examples. First, biblical narratives of incarnation.
Jesus himself is the prime example. Think of his interactions, the Samaritan woman, lepers, Zacchaeus the tax collector. He met people right where they were in their context, crossing social barriers.
He entered their stories.
Precisely. Then early church practices. As we discussed, their communities embodied love and justice, addressing holistic needs, physical, social, spiritual, within their context. They lived among the people they served.
And modern mission.
We see it today in effective healthcare, education, and community development initiatives that are deeply rooted in the local context, often led by local people working alongside the community.
So what are some practical strategies for this?
The document suggests things like cultivate deep listening and learning. Be a student of the culture first.
Okay.
Build authentic relationships, invest time, be vulnerable, and importantly, empower community-led solutions. Don't impose, collaborate.
What's the broader impact of this incarnational approach?
Well, it leads to greater relevance and respect. It helps heal wounds and build bridges across cultural divides. And ultimately, it provides a living witness to the kingdom, showing God's love in action, not just talking about it.
It sounds like a much more humble, patient, and ultimately perhaps more effective way to engage.
I think that's the argument, yes. It mirrors God's own approach in Christ.
Let's look now at some specific historical and modern testimonies of the gospel reshaping societies. Real-world examples.
Right, moving from principles to evidence. Historical testimonies. First, transformation in the Roman Empire.
We touched on this. Early believers challenging norms through faith and ethics.
Exactly. In a brutal context, they championed human dignity, cared for the poor and sick, valued the sanctity of life. These radical ideas, lived out, laid groundwork for concepts like charity, hospitals, eventually human rights. It was a slow burn, but transformative.
Then, the abolition of slavery, a major societal shift.
Driven significantly by Christian conviction about the inherent dignity of all humans, created in God's image. Figures like Wilberforce in the UK were motivated by their faith. It became a moral imperative that reshaped laws and attitudes with ripple effects on human rights globally.
And missionaries in modern institutions.
Despite complex legacies, many missionaries historically established vital healthcare and education initiatives around the world, often in places where none existed, driven by a desire to serve holistically.
Okay, what about modern testimonies? Examples closer to our time.
The document points to things like integrity in the face of corruption, believers in various contexts standing for ethical practices in business or government, sometimes at great personal cost.
Acting as salt and light.
Yes. Also, empowering the poor. Faith-based organizations involved in microfinance, job training, community development, helping lift people out of poverty with dignity.
And reconciliation and healing. This seems crucial in many parts of the world.
Hugely important. Faith communities often play a key role in post-conflict situations, like in Rwanda after the genocide, fostering forgiveness, trauma healing, and rebuilding social trust.
So what are the practical implications from these testimonies?
First, embracing active citizenship, seeing that our faith calls us to engage responsibly in civic life.
Right.
Second, building collaborative networks, working together with others, churches, NGOs, community groups to address societal challenges more effectively.
And third,
Cultivating a legacy of transformation, recognizing that our actions today, guided by faith, contribute to shaping a better future, just as past generations did.
these historical examples really ground the discussion, don't they? Let's look deeper at some of these echoes of transformation. Historical precedents. The gospel as a public force.
Right, focusing on specific moments, the Roman Empire, compassion and collapse. We mentioned the context brutality hierarchy.
Yeah.
The gospel disrupted this with compassion, care for the vulnerable, valuing every life. The long-term impact on charity and Western moral thought is undeniable, even if it took centuries.
Then there's Alfred the Great, a monarch formed by the kingdom. An interesting specific example.
Yes, an Anglo-Saxon king who consciously tried to integrate his Christian faith into governance, law, and education during a very turbulent time. A historical example of faith influencing public life from the top.
And the abolitionist movement, a gospel call to justice, revisited again.
Worth revisiting because the theological foundation, the Imago Dei, the image of God in every person, was so central. Figures like Wilberforce or Harriet Tubman in the U.S. saw their work as a direct outworking of their faith. It forced a moral realignment.
And a more recent example, Rwanda's reconciliation, resurrection after genocide.
A powerful, though complex and ongoing story where faith communities have been central to the incredibly difficult work of forgiveness, trauma healing, and rebuilding national unity after unimaginable horror.
What enduring principles can we draw from these diverse examples?
The document suggests the gospel is public truth, not just private belief. Transformation often happens through incarnation being present and involved. And seeking justice is a form of worship, an outworking of faith.
This brings up an important point, learning from experiences beyond our own Western context. The next section is learning from the global church, beyond Western models.
Yes, crucial. Recognizing the gospel isn't inherently Western, and Christianity is incredibly vibrant and growing in the global South Africa, Asia, Latin America.
So the shifting center of gravity.
Exactly. More Christians now live outside Europe and North America than within them. This reverses the old missionary flow and brings fresh perspectives, innovation, and leadership from non-Western churches. We have much to learn.
What can we learn? Let's look at examples. African initiatives in reconciliation.
We mentioned Rwanda and Burundi. Churches there often use deeply contextual methods, drawing on local traditions alongside biblical principles to foster holistic reconciliation. Indigenous leadership and cultural redemption are key themes.
Fascinating. Asian models of community development.
In places like India, the Philippines, Indonesia, the gospel is often seen as a force for empowerment, particularly among marginalized communities. Things like microfinance initiatives are sometimes used as missional strategies, addressing economic needs alongside spiritual ones.
And Latin American liberation theology. That's sometimes controversial, isn't it?
It has been, yes, but the document highlights its emphasis on God's preferential option for the poor, combining prophetic protest against injustice with pastoral compassion. It stresses contextual theology, integral mission, addressing the whole person and giving a voice to the voiceless.
So what are the theological and practical implications of learning from the global church?
It means decentralizing Western authority and assumptions, reimagining mission as mutual partnership and learning, and rediscovering the gospel's full scope, its power to address injustice, foster reconciliation, care for creation, and inspire reform, often in ways Western churches have neglected.
This requires a lot of humility, doesn't it? Which leads perfectly into learning and adapting pilgrim, not conqueror. Humility is essential.
Absolutely essential. The gospel transcends culture, but it's never cultureless. We need to approach other cultures as learners, as pilgrims, not as conquerors with all the answers.
So, gospel, transcultural, not neutral. Jesus was both a Jewish carpenter and the global Lord.
Exactly. The gospel isn't colorblind, it's color-rich. It finds expression within every culture. Cultural humility means recognizing and respecting this diversity, not trying to erase it.
Then, listening and learning, missional ear. This seems critical.
It is. We need to listen deeply to understand a culture before we speak. How do people think? What are their stories, fears, hopes? Truth often emerges in dialogue, not monologue. This builds trust and ensures the message connects.
And a key warning: resisting cultural imperialism. Distinguishing the gospel core from our own cultural baggage.
This is hard but vital. We often unconsciously package the gospel with our own cultural preferences, individualism, certain political structures, linear ways of thinking.
Can you give examples of cultural baggage?
Sure. Maybe assuming that Western-style democratic structures are the only Christian way, or that individual decision-making is always paramount, overlooking communal cultures, or imposing Western worship styles. We need biblical fidelity married to cultural sensitivity.
Which leads to embracing collaboration, hierarchy to partnership.
Transformation happens with communities, not to them or for them. It requires shifting from top-down models to genuine partnership, recognizing the mutuality and interdependence of the global body of Christ. Everyone brings gifts to the table.
How do we apply this? Practical application, humble engagement.
The document suggests: assess before acting, understand the context. Identify cultural bridges. Where does the gospel naturally connect? Empower indigenous leaders, they know their culture best. Create space for theological dialogue, learning together. And practice repentance, acknowledging when we get it wrong.
Being a pilgrim, not a conqueror. That's a powerful image for engagement.
It changes the posture completely.
Yeah, let's tie some threads together. Seeds of societal renewal. Kingdom theology cultivates. Seeing the gospel beyond personal piety to world restoration.
Right. Kingdom theology provides that actionable vision of divine renewal impacting all of life, not just the religious part.
So kingdom theology, more than a metaphor. Jesus' first sermon was about the kingdom, right? Mark 1:15.
Yes. The time has come. The kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe the good news. It was central. The core truths are: God's reign is comprehensive, it's already here but not yet fully, and the church acts as a kind of embassy or preview of the kingdom.
So these are the seeds of societal renewal. The kingdom vision invades all domains.
Exactly. It compels us to ask bold questions about righteousness, justice, and mercy in every sphere: economics, politics, education, arts, environment, everywhere.
What are some practical domains of renewal mentioned?
Economic justice, challenging exploitative systems. Political integrity, advocating for ethical governance. Environmental stewardship, caring for creation. Cultural renewal, engaging the arts and media. Educational equity, ensuring opportunity for all.
There are strong biblical foundations for this, aren't there?
Absolutely. Micah 6.8, act justly, love mercy, walk humbly. Isaiah 58, true worship involves loosening chains of injustice. Matthew 25, serving the least of these is serving Christ. Acts 17, turning the world upside down.
Are there real-world case studies where kingdom theology seemingly fueled a national change?
The document briefly mentions examples like post-war growth and democratization in South Korea, faith-based responses to the AIDS crisis in Uganda, or movements for social justice in Brazil, suggesting kingdom principles were at play. Obviously, complex situations, but illustrative.
What action steps does this suggest for us?
Reframing our theology to embrace the kingdom scope, discerning our specific domain or sphere of influence, cultivating partnerships, and innovating, finding creative ways to embody kingdom values in our context.
This connects back strongly to incarnational ministry, God who moved in, proximity being transformative.
Yes, the incarnation as the ultimate blueprint. John 1.1, see again, God entering the human story. Ministry becomes about identification, presence, not just information transfer.
The scandal of proximity. Why is just being there so powerful?
Because it builds trust in a way that sticks can't. It inherently challenges power structures, the powerful choosing to be with the marginalized, and it sparks holistic change because you see the interconnectedness of needs firsthand.
So there's a cost and power of being with.
Definitely. It requires immersion, vulnerability, long-term commitment. It's often inefficient and messy, but the power lies in that shared life and solidarity.
Biblical examples of this proximity.
Abraham leaving his home, Esther risking her life by approaching the king, Jesus obviously living among ordinary people, Paul working alongside the believers he discipled.
And modern-day incarnational movements.
Think of community health workers living in the villages they serve, educators moving into underserved neighborhoods, reconciliation workers building relationships across deep divides like in Rwanda or parts of South Asia, people intentionally choosing proximity in urban centers.
What are the practical applications for incarnational ministry?
Redefine mission as presence, not just projects. Embrace long-term engagement. Empower local leaders who are already proximate. Learn the language and culture. Live simply, reducing barriers.
It's a call to move in, not just pass through.
Precisely.
This emphasis on context is crucial. Let's look at contextualized evangelism and discipleship. One gospel, many tongues. The gospel adapting an expression.
Yes, the core message is universal, but how it's communicated and lived out needs to resonate within a specific cultural context.
So, theological roots. God who speaks our language. The gospel isn't generic.
Not at all. The incarnation itself is the ultimate contextualization, God speaking to us in human terms. Pentecost in Acts 2, people hearing the gospel in their own languages. Paul saying in 1 Corinthians 9, he became all things to all people to save some.
So, contextual evangelism, speaking into narrative, what does that involve?
It means understanding a culture's stories, values, questions, and showing how the gospel connects with their deepest longings, using redemptive analogies, cultural elements that can point towards Christ, and crucially, rejecting cultural imperialism, not forcing our cultural forms onto others.
And contextual discipleship, whole life followers.
Discipleship isn't one size fits all either. Following Jesus looks different in different cultures. We need to build on local bricks, using cultural frameworks to understand and apply biblical truth.
Can you give examples?
Sure. In honor-shame cultures, discipleship might focus more on restoring honor through Christ and community belonging. In guilt-innocence cultures, it might emphasize forgiveness of sin. In fear-power cultures, it might highlight Christ's power over spiritual forces. The core truths remain, but the emphasis shifts.
What are the societal implications? How does contextual faith shape public life?
When faith is contextualized, its social expression also fits the culture. Seeking justice might look different. Reconciliation processes might use culturally relevant methods. Empowering the marginalized happens in ways that make sense locally.
What are the practical steps for leaders trying to do this?
Become cultural learners, deep listening again. Identify those redemptive analogies, empower local believers to lead and theologize, and carefully guard the core non-negotiable truths of the gospel while allowing flexibility and expression.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it?
Very delicate, requires wisdom and humility.
Okay, bringing it all together now. Living out the transforming gospel, from belief to embodied mission. The gospel as a life lived, a culture cultivated.
Yes, moving beyond just intellectual assent to practical pathways that naturally flow from faith and transform communities.
So, the power of practical pathways. Everyday actions matter.
Immensely. These deliberate expressions of God's justice and mercy are how the kingdom often becomes visible in the world.
Like engaging in justice and mercy. How are these defined here?
Justice is seen relationally restoring right relationships with God, others, creation. Mercy is compassion in motion, practical care like healthcare, refugee support, counseling, addiction recovery.
And community development through gospel lens.
This goes beyond charity to empowerment. Things like ethical microfinance, vocational training, sustainable agriculture, helping people build better futures for themselves, rooted in dignity.
Then there's ethical and moral leadership. being salt and light.
Exactly. In business, politics, education, the arts, wherever believers are, modeling integrity, serving others, seeking the common good, influence through character.
And crucial for impact, supporting contextualized mission.
This involves rethinking partnership, moving away from donor-driven models, supporting local-led movements, engaging in cross-cultural learning, receiving as well as giving, equipping without controlling.
So these pathways, justice, mercy, community development, leadership, partnership, they become the pathways to national renewal.
That's the idea. Justice transforming policy, mercy healing divides, community modeling a different way, leadership inspiring change, partnership multiplying impact. It's the embodied gospel at work.
Let's revisit contextualized discipleship, rooting transformation in culture, just briefly, as it seems so foundational.
Yes, it underpins everything else. The imperative of cultural engagement. The gospel needs to take root in local soil to bear lasting fruit.
And defining contextual discipleship, it affirms human dignity and cultural particularity.
Right. It honors both our shared humanity in Christ and the unique ways different cultures express their humanity. The incarnation is the precedent, again, God meeting us within our specific context.
Key elements mentioned are cultural humility, listening before speaking, identifying cultural gatekeepers, building strategic relationships, discipleship that addresses local needs, holistic formation, and celebrating cultural expressions of faith, unity and diversity.
All crucial components. It recognizes that discipleship isn't about erasing culture, but redeeming it and allowing faith to flourish authentically within it. The Bible itself provides foundations for this contextual approach.
And the broader implication, discipleship transforms culture from the inside out.
Exactly. When people follow Jesus within their context, their transformed lives and values inevitably begin to reshape the culture around them.
This all sounds great, but maybe overwhelming. How does the individual fit in? Your role in the ripple effect, utilizing your gifts.
This is key. It dismantles the myth of the special call. God's mission isn't just for pastors or missionaries, it's for every believer, right where they are.
Biblical foundations. God uses ordinary people. Fishermen, tax collectors.
Exactly. The Bible is full of examples. God delights in using ordinary people with diverse gifts and backgrounds.
So discovering your role, gifts, passions, spheres. How do we figure this out?
By looking honestly at, what are my God-given talents and abilities, gifts? What issues or people groups am I passionate about? Where do I already have influence, spheres, my family, workplace, neighborhood, hobbies? The intersection often points to our specific role.
And there are real-world pathways for using these gifts.
Countless ways. A business person using their skills ethically, creating jobs, a teacher nurturing students, an artist creating beauty that points to truth, a parent raising children in faith, a volunteer serving the homeless, a citizen advocating for justice.
The spiritual principle, faithfulness over fame. It's not about big results.
Not primarily. God calls us to be faithful with what we've been given, whether it seems large or small. Faithfulness in the small things is what matters.
And this creates the ripple effect. Your faithfulness sparks change.
Yes. Our individual acts of obedience and love, however small, ripple outwards, influencing others and contributing to God's larger work in ways we may never fully see.
What are some practical steps to activate your influence?
Pray and discern your specific calling. Steward your current roles faithfully. Connect with others who share your passions. Take small, obedient steps. Don't despise small beginnings.
The conclusion, you are not a bystander. Everyone has a part to play.
Absolutely. You are an active participant in God's mission of renewal.
Okay, let's wrap up with a kingdom vision for a transformed world, bringing all these ideas together.
Right, a final summary of this grand vision. Gospel. More than personal rescue, we've established that. It's about world renewal.
Kingdom theology, framework for renewal.
Providing the theological basis for holistic transformation.
Yes, and holistic engagement. Faith becomes flesh. This involves contextualized discipleship, justice and mercy in action, and seeing community itself as part of the mission.
What about cultural renewal? Theology of creation and creativity. Recognizing that God values culture and creativity. Engaging arts, media, sciences, education, seeking to bring truth, beauty, and goodness into these spheres.
And thinking long-term, generational impact, planting seeds for the future.
Our actions today have consequences for generations to come. We're called to build sustainably, investing in future leaders and institutions that carry the kingdom vision forward.
And finally, your place in the kingdom story. Call to co-labor.
It comes back to that personal invitation. Every believer is called to partner with God in his renewing work, using their unique gifts and context.
Wow, that's a comprehensive vision. So just to summarize the key insights from our deep dive today.
Well, we've seen the gospel's power extends far beyond individual salvation, holding the potential for national transformation.
Right, through concepts like holistic salvation, caring for the whole person and society, and incarnational ministry, meeting people where they are with humility.
And the importance of contextualization, adapting the gospel's expression without compromising its core, and learning from the diverse, vibrant global church.
And embracing that already not yet tension encourages us to act now with hope, but also with patience and humility, knowing the ultimate fulfillment is God's.
Crucially, we all have a role. Every believer can participate in this ripple effect, using their unique gifts in their own spheres of influence.
Okay, so here's a final thought to leave with our listeners, something to mull over. How will you step into your specific context this week to be a seed of societal renewal, reflecting the comprehensive love and justice of God's kingdom?
That's a great question. Maybe even simpler. What one small, intentional step can you take right where you are to live out the transforming gospel in your sphere of influence this week?